everyone, and welcome to Really Old Movies. I'm your host, Harrison Scullin, and today I'll be discussing HUD from 1963, starring Paul Newman and Patricia O'Neal. So now let me share some behind-the-scenes details about this film. So speaking of Patricia O'Neal, she's only in the movie for 21 minutes and 51 seconds, making her performance both the shortest to win Best Actress and the shortest to win in a leading category. Another detail, Paul Newman played the part of HUD as a villain. He was later stunned that so many young moviegoers had a poster of HUD and viewed him as a hero. And so those are my behind-the-scenes details and whatnot. Let me share you my thoughts on the plot. So, the plot, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really liked the story, as depressing as it was, and I do think the film was a bit too long, though. There's just a lot of scenes of characters sitting around not doing anything. I would have liked to see a little bit more what they're doing, a little bit more of why HUD is the way he is and whatnot. And honestly, the only major plot point is they're waiting on the cows if they're healthy or not. And sometimes I was kind of lost in how much time was passing, because sometimes it felt like it was a few months. But in reality, this movie takes place over like 2 or 3 days. Time was just a little difficult to figure out what was going on. But other than that, I really like the story, and I think overall it deserves a 4 out of 5. All right, let's move on to acting. So the acting, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was fantastic. I thought Paul Newman did great. I thought Patricia O'Neal did great. Melvin Douglas, all three of them were really, really great. The only not as great actor was the young actor. I can't remember his name. But other than that, I thought everybody did very well. And what I love is with Paul Newman's portrayal of this character, we know he's a terrible guy. He does terrible things. And he even says he tried to play him as an evil character. And yet he's so charming. You can't help but like him. And I thought that was a great, great performance. I thought he did fantastic. And even Melvin Douglas, I mean, the best scene with him is right after, he has to shoot his bulls and whatnot, and just how angry he was, very short he was. It was a great scene overall, but the acting is fantastic. Definitely the highlight of the film for sure. All right, let's move on to directing. So the directing, I give it a 4 out of 5. This is directed by a man named Martin Ritt. I had not heard of him before. This is one of his more popular films. The reason why I gave it a 4, I just don't think it needed to be a 2.5. Well, maybe it was like 2 hours, 20 minutes. It didn't need to be that long of a film. I think it could have been a lot shorter. But overall, I really liked this movie. But again, I don't know if it's one I'd want to watch again, just because of how depressing it is, how dark it is, and whatnot. But overall, I think he did a great job, and I think there's a reason why this movie is one of his more popular. He also did another Paul Newman film called Hombre, and let's see, what else did he do? I think those are the only 2 Paul Newman, I guess, on here, but this is definitely one of his more popular films for sure. All right, let's move on then to cinematography and special effects. So I gave this a 5. I thought it was a beautifully shot film, especially the scenes on the farm and with the cows and whatnot, just on the huge pieces of land. I want to say they were really in Texas, like the film takes place in. It just was beautiful country, and there wasn't really a set at all. I mean, even the house, I'm pretty sure, was a real house. And the stores they go to were real, so it was a very realistic film. And I thought it was fantastic. That's why I gave it a 5 out of 5. All right, let's move on to music. So the music, I gave it a 3 out of 5. The music isn't important in this film. It's really, plays on the characters' radios and whatnot. There's no background score really or anything like that. Just in the beginning and the end, and I thought it was really good. It really set the Western tone of it. This movie I would consider to be a Western, even though it's a contemporary film. But it just doesn't play as big of a role, and that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5. Because other films like Stagecoach and the searchers and whatnot. The scores in that really help elevate the film. This one didn't rely on music; it relied on the acting for doing the heavy lifting. So 3 out of 5. All right, so my overall score, tallying it all up, that brings it to a 4.2 out of 5, which I rounding to a 4 out of 5. That brings my critic list percentage to an 84%. And let me share what on critic list I rated it at. So for graphic language, I put a bit more. It's not super explicit or anything like that, but it's a little bit more than your standard film from this era. Let's see, as far as violence goes, there's some fighting and blood and whatnot, but nothing super explicit. And then for nudity, sexual content, this has a bit more than usual. It's actually pretty disturbing. There's an attempted rape scene, and that was pretty disturbing. But nothing explicit is shown. It's a very quick scene, too. But nonetheless, still a very disturbing scene. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So political bias, none. And so that's why this film isn't family friendly. That's the next point here. It is not family friendly. I do not think kids should watch this movie. And I kind of agree with Paul Newman. It's pretty disturbing that a lot of guys were looking up to HUD as a hero. Now, to be fair, if you look at the poster of the movie, it looks like, your average Western, or, it looks like he's a hero, right? It's portraying him on there as a hero. So it makes you wonder, what the intentions of the studio were. But again, we can't know for sure, right? But it's just kind of interesting that kids looked up to him as a hero, even though he's such a terrible person in this movie. All right, so in regards to entertainment value, it's weird for me to say that this film, in a film like this, with an evil character who does terrible things, he's terrible to people, and everything that happens to him is like a comeuppance, if you will, like it's finally catching up to him. So I don't know if I have a hard time saying that was entertaining, because it's not entertaining in the sense of funny or anything like that. It's entertaining in the sense that it's showcasing what could happen if you're not careful and if you become kind of lost and depraved, kind of like how HUD is. It's more of a character study than anything. And it's also one of those where, as much as I loved it and enjoyed it, I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, because it's a pretty depressing film. And you have to be in that kind of mindset to really want to watch this film. It's not a happy-go-lucky Western or anything like that. It's pretty dark. And so with that all, would I recommend this movie? Yes, I would, but it is a tough watch. This isn't the kind of movie you throw on TV to show to your kids or anything like that. Kids should not watch it at all. And overall, it is the story of how a man finally gets his comeuppance for all the terrible things he does. Because throughout the film, right, he and his dad have a very strained relationship. He and his nephew have a strained relationship, and the maiden, or the housemaid, they all have strained relationships. And at the end of the day, he finally gets what he wants, but at what cost, right? The maid, she leaves. She can't be around him anymore, hates him because of how terrible he was to her. The nephew, same thing. He realizes HUD isn't the hero he thought it was, and he leaves him. And then HUD's dad, spoiler alert, he dies. And so finally, HUD gets what he's always wanted, which is the ranch and whatnot, but at what cost? He lost all of that in the meantime. So it really is a character study, more of a warning of what not to do. So I guess in that sense, I recommend it. But again, this is not one you will watch all the time. This is not a very fun movie either. It's pretty depressing. But yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on HUD from 1963, and that's today's movie review.